Hi, this is Larry Blumenfeld. I should be down in Charleston, South Carolina, along with Jason Moran, Alicia Hall Moran, and Julie Dash. But we're not. I'm at my home in Brooklyn. Jason and Alicia, you're in Harlem?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Julie, you are?
Atlanta.
Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason we're getting together virtually is to talk about what we would have been doing together in Charleston this week at Spoleto Festival USA, which is mounting a new iteration of Two Wings. So Jason, Alicia, could you tell us a little bit about just what was the original concept for this project to begin with, or what inspired you?
So we were invited to bring a story of the Great Migration to Carnegie Hall in New York City. And New York has a specific history, and it's been the recipient of migrants from certain places in the Black historical narrative. So, for my family, it just became about how did I get to New York? And my story was Georgia, freed slaves, emancipated, educated there, made their way, some on foot, right? The story of the family that walks to Pennsylvania, like I have one of those in my family, right? Until he found work. Just keep making your way up. He's a handyman too, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then in Jason's side, he's coming from Louisiana, and he can talk about that. But we really tried to bring our personal stories to the stage, not in a narrative form. We much prefer great writers and filmmakers of the world to bring their storytelling craft to light. But we tried to just make sure that everything read and felt true. So like I bring forward musicians that I care about and that are telling that communal story of how we came from the South and got up here.
And got out, and get out is really a part of leaving the South, part of leaving Houston, Texas is getting away from what is experienced down there for Black folks and what we have felt for generations and generations. But then when you leave, you also bring all this basket of sound, of food, of glory, of pain. You bring it to wherever you arrive. And you open your suitcase, and all your emotions come flooding out. And for musicians, it always comes flooding out on stage. The stage has generally been the place where a musician could actually work through their trauma and actually have a place to actually go buck wild without feeling like they were, going to be put in the loony bin, right? So the artist always felt a place to kind of use it as the portal. And then the composer also found a way to send the message back down south. This is the route you take out, right? These are the highways you can go through. This is what you'll see when you get to Kansas City. This is what you will hear, right? And so you hear all these signs throughout Black music about geography. And it wasn't just because it sounded good. It was a signpost to say, when you got here, you were going to be happy because you would hear this. You would see people that talk like this. You would hear a new version of ambition, of things that you hadn't quite seen yet in your ancestral history, and you might want to envision it somewhere else, because that barrier of which was oppression and terrible and violent oppression is so rampant and so everyday that people are really trying to find their way up and out. So we want to find out how does that sound, when you put all those songs together, not as in the pop top 40 way, but as in a way of really reckoning with how musicians found a way to produce music despite the trauma.
And for me, it was how to make sure it feels right. That's, I think, how we work together as a team, too. He's doing the sound. I'm like, what's the feeling? What am I leaving out? Black people have been singing classical music and so-called classical music for just as long as that classical music has been in the United States. We've been a witness to every turn in the U.S. because we've been here since every turn in the U.S.
Right,
So,
And the South
Can't leave it out.
And we also look for partners who also who aren't afraid to carry their story with them. Some people say, I'm leaving all that over there. I'm not dealing with it.
Right.
We aren't those artists. So we're also looking for people who also are really open and generous and still trying to figure it out through their process.
But that's not a choice. I want to be clear. That's not like a sophisticated choice. That's literally, I cannot perform and my parents not show up. So you can't, you know, his mom is very famous for having these musicales in the living room, inviting all his aunts and uncles, the cousins who play. It's like we're from families that have taught us this way. There's going to be no separation. And that's like, you know what I'm saying? You see this? You see this?
Yeah.
Like, we are haunted
This is
and
so
uplifted by the family.
So true.
But is it a choice?
No, it's a continuous pursuit of the curiosity of what's going on and how did I get to here and what's the and who, what, when, where, and how. I grew up in a family of musicians. I was just telling Larry because my Uncle Julian was a tenor saxophone player who wrote Tuxedo Junction.
Oh, wow.
So I was, Julian Dash. So I was born and raised in New York City.
Repertoire.
But we were different, and I always knew we were different because we hung out in the Geechee section of, 155th Street in Broadway, in Uptown Harlem, where it was like a whole Geechee enclave, and everyone had that Geechee accent, and it was just like, and then we'd go back home because I lived in the Queensbridge Projects, and I used to hide things that, the whole musical thing that people would be walking around the house with a clarinet or a saxophone player. That was like, you don't want anybody to know that. Eating crabs, for breakfast is like, it's like, is someone going to knock on the door and we got a crab running around? All those things. So it was kind of a trauma too, because my father's Geechee accent was very heavy, and people used to say, well, where is he from? And I was like, he's from South Carolina. And I was like, oh, he sounds like he's German or something. They really said that. So anyway, everything that you've been saying is true. It's just like, it was partial curiosity of trying to figure out who the heck are these people that I come from? Why are we so different? I can't get any straight answers from people because, if you ask a straight answer, why are we speaking like that? Why are you talking like that? They go, no one would tell you.
Wow.
But it was some wonderful things going on. Most of the men cooked in my family. That was a different thing. Right. And wore aprons too. And so, like, once again, like when neighbors would come over, they would say, oh, your daddy's cooking. It was like, yeah, he cooks better than mother. I mean, little things like that, they seem like so insignificant, but we were just very different. I came from a very different family, and I didn't know, it wasn't called the Low Country back then. It was just the islands, they just called it, the Sea Islands, and right. And they just said, don't let anyone call you a Geechee, but be proud that you're a Geechee.
I'm trying to think. It's a slippery feeling because you never know if you're doing it right or you're just not doing it right. But like we have a compulsion to do and to make on the history.
Well, I think if you always try to maintain the historical integrity of a project, you could, go postmodern, you could expand, you could go experimental, you could go hybrid, but it's the integrity of it. The cultural or traditional integrity you should be able to feel it, sense it.
Yeah, knowing what these stories mean to you, don't you just feel when it's going the wrong way or it's somehow not staying true to the spirit or history that you want to tell?
When I'm watching things, I get, let's put it this way, let's go positive. When something is working, you get the cold chills. the hair, you get the cold chills, and you start to weep, you know.
Yes.
In the audience listening to the music or whatever, and you're trying to hold it together, you know, depending on who you're with, that's when it's working. It's touching on a whole different level. The resonance is just, you know.
Do you ever talk out loud about what that felt like? The scene in the movie, the scene in Daughters of the Dust, where Mr. Sneed, the photographer, he's taking a picture, and they say, Evo, what does he say? Show us Evo's landing. But he made it like a verb, like, act like you show us.
Look up. And because it's kind of, he's giving them a command, like, look up. It's like they're saluting, you know, Evo landing. Yeah.
That's like the craving. Like, I think, if I could think of, I didn't know it.
Look up and remember Evo landing. That's because I like to play with the memory, collective memory.
I feel the progress that was made in Chicago. We're living on the shoulders of all these cities, and as we got St. Louis, you know, Newark, Brooklyn, New York City, like Detroit, we just up here like this, right? So New Orleans. So there's that we've been taunting the South, but I will let Jason speak because he's from the South, Louisiana and Houston and Texas, about what this emergence, because it's a big deal. I feel it.
Yeah, and it's a necessary move. It's a necessary feeling. There's been a part about those who, you know, musicians who leave the South and they bring their sound with them. Yeah, and then some people go back, right? And so, you know, it feels nice to go back and play it again. But I think what we know about being in Spoleto, and also then learning that Julie's parents from down there, and she was raised in New York, that there's something so special about being, you know, what Isabel Wilkerson calls, what she says, sons and daughters of the Great Migration, right?
Yes, the children of the Great Migration being received in the stations of the Great Migration. The great cities of the Great Migration are the receiving ports of us.
And I was listening to Haile, Garima, and Charles Burnett.
Yeah.
They were talking about being in school in
Charlie
LA.
and Haile together. It's like, they're like,
yes, it was very special. And they started talking about Julie, and I was like, that's who we have to call.
Oh, wait a minute. When did you hear them talking about her?
This was in September.
Oh, okay.
This was in September.
I saw Charlie recently. We were up at some college in just before the quarantine. So it must have been February. Yeah.
Because Jason has sat with them.
Charlie's amazing. He's from Texas too, originally.
Yeah.
There's like an ongoing.
Who's from the South?
And filmmaking as being kind of, I don't want to say a portal or an encyclopedia, but there's just, I mean, to me, there's just certain whole.
We couldn't sing. We didn't know how to play any instruments or sing, so we picked up a camera.
Well, that's
so much harder.
Intimidated by the prose of Toni Morrison, we said, well, what else?
So Julie, if we're talking about concert makers and performers, and we're talking about you, visual world, characters, set, costume, collaboration, production design, lighting, vision, angle, point of view, like real point of view, then I wonder when we're going to present together, if you see the words that the actors speak as a poem that could ever be translated out of your art form and be a bridge, or if the words, the language, the script you've written belong there and we need a new story. How does that?
Well, I was working with a young lady once. She was doing a project called Requiem for Rice. And the problem that I started seeing is just like you don't want to have lyrics over music, over a spoken word, because they start fighting one another. Mm-hmm. And you can't appreciate, you don't want them married. Mm-hmm. The voices and the music and everything married. You want them separate. Mm-hmm. They're like separate vibrations, if you will. So silent film works. So it just becomes a visual rhetoric that you're sharing, and it doesn't take, because our senses can only take so much.
Yes. Right.
I wouldn't think of a character speaking or interfering with the music. I would just think, like the old-fashioned silent films might work best.
Maybe it sounds mundane to ask, but then, where will you be writing text that then Jason and Alicia interpret or incorporate, or will you be, how does that connection begin?
Well, you got to tell me what you need, what you would like to see.
We have to just know her story in her mind. And what I was excited to see was how much of her story was going to be. No, I won't even say that. She has so many tools in the kit. It's like a great chef. Okay, chef, show me your family. They might not talk and just dice carrots, and we're just watching these person make carrots.
I did send that short video I made about you follow the suitcase from.
Yes.
That was my idea of doing a low budget migration film. Could not afford an actor. So I decided to use a suitcase to represent a person migrating and what they would do prior to their leaving the Low Country. You visit your old house, you visit the cemetery to say goodbye to your relatives, you go to the churches, go to the train station, you do all of these things. And so I kind of like it too. I like to have a challenge. It's like, how can I tell this story where people can feel something without seeing, without having the actor or dialogue. And so we did that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah.
When I opened your book of Daughters of the Dust, I have to say, I would just open the page and read a sentence. Amelia did not need to understand the words to know their meaning. That could be two wings. The migration of Black music in America. We did not need to understand the words to know it. I was like, oh, this yes, ma'am. Send me a little taste. I ain't had none in a long time. Oh. Two wings. The migration of Black music in America. Send me a little taste. I ain't had none in a long time. It's like it's replete with everything. And that's just her in her own. So I would just say what we were looking forward to was how to not get in the way of, if you had a mic, if it just came up as stand-up comedy for 20 minutes, or if it came out as recipes for balms, which are also in here. Anything. It pours out. She says sweetgrass. It's like, but when she says sweetgrass, it's not like, oh, I was a tourist and I had a great time and I bought this amazing basket. That's my sweetgrass story. Things I bought.
And the music then becomes the frame. Right?
Yes.
So now we have a way to listen to the music because, she was talking about crabs running around her apartment. All of a sudden, all these songs sound different.
Shellfish. So, Julie, the other thing that I was looking forward to seeing was your interaction, just that moment when you meet the woodwind quintet Imani Winds.
Oh, okay.
Julie Dash plus this beautiful African-American bassoonist, female. Mm-hmm. A bassoon, this is a very heavy, large instrument. Mm-hmm. And she has all the classical chops, all the chops, right? Yeah. But she's also living in Harlem and is a mother And I'm speaking of Monica from The Amani Winds, and it's like,
there's something that happens with it that's a gathering too, right?
It really is.
And it really does evolve through the 2 days that we usually have together to kind of work with each other.
Yeah.
And then when the concert happens, it's just that generally, no matter the great history of concerts that have happened throughout history, it becomes apparent that there aren't enough of these, where the histories are trying to get gathered up in one room and be presented together.
Toshi Reagan,
I saw her
with me in the South.
Wow.
We won't even know how good that will feel till we do it. That's how simple the recipes are. It's like for the first time somebody did chocolate and peanut butter. Oh, what? Like, because I'm better when I'm looking at something I love. That I can say that truly. Because there's so much water in the film that when we knew it would work, after of course the beautiful mind digging that Jason did and said, "Oh, Julie Dash, that's it." It was also then to go look at the film and just vet your assumption. Like, just let's make sure, because what if it was set in Baltimore and we forgot? Like, you just have to, don't assume. Just go back. So we went back.
I love the water, but I also have a great respect for the water because it's so dangerous on the islands because the island current. You got very powerful swimmers. So most people do, they go, don't go in that water because it pull you under. And then sometimes if you're not familiar when there's low tide and when there's high tide, you could be out on a sandbar saying, "Oh, I'm having a wonderful time," and you could turn around and you're surrounded by water.
Right.
When your character was walking on the water.
Right.
Oh yeah, we built a platform. That's a little sea. Yeah, we built a bridge underground.
But that makes it like even more real.
Yeah, we also had rescue divers in a rescue boat because he couldn't swim. And it was, and when he walked out there with the one costume, you're supposed to have doubles. We only could afford one costume. He walked out there and touched that figurehead and went into a trance.
Wow.
The film rolled out, AJ reloaded, and we started filming again. And it's like, should someone go get him? And then eventually he came back and he didn't remember what happened. He went into a trance. Wow. And things like that would happen you can't tell everyone this because it just, they were like, oh, he must have been smoking something. I don't know. It's just, it was just the dialogue that was happening with Albert talking about Evo landing and the Evos and seeing the Evos float. All of a sudden, it made sense to him. Everything came together. And he took the water and he started baptizing the figurehead. That wasn't written in the script. That wasn't my name. He just started doing it. And it's just,
wow.
Wait, are you telling me can Larry put this in the conversation? Or are you saying don't put this in the conversation? No, you can put it in the conversation.
Okay. But I don't want anyone to think it's like anything spooky. You know how
No, it doesn't sound like lore. It's the film. The power.
Otherworldly things were happening. Because for us, those sea islands are those stepping stones. For us, it's our Ellis Island. And there was a lot of stuff that went on down there, a lot of blood in the sand. And so.
Yes. When in the beginning of the film, too, she says, no, it didn't just end with slavery. They were bringing Africans in because it's so secluded.
Now they talk about it. Yeah, they were sneaking people in Sullivan's Island years after it was illegal. They wanted fresh Africans, but they were cheaper. Yeah, that's a part of history. There's so many pockets of information that I was able to uncover while I was, a graduate student at UCLA. It was unbelievable stuff. And then the whole stuff about the Bilal Muhammad, and his practice of Islam down in the Sea Islands for years. And he had 5 daughters, and they continued to practice. No one really talks about that. Everyone tries to like kind of, they use Gone with the Wind as kind of like the paradigm of what Southern culture was. And it's really very different.
I think an important part of you contributing to something public with us around music is not just in how it's made, but it's also for the audience to understand that you witnessed it. Because something that I don't know people know they can have too is a review of what happened. So that there's what it was, but there's also that I saw it. Then Julie Dash saw what happened. She felt the energy, and it was a combine. But then where that goes in you, and what we feel after are these things you can't really talk about them, but they just last in you. And so I just want to express my gratitude that you were so open to sit with it, open to just be. This people, no one can take this for granted.
I'm glad I came up when I did, and being with Charles Burnett and Haile Garima with that collective group in LA, where it was absolutely permissible and desired to try to find your authentic self. And as we studied all these foreign films, whether it was French New Wave or Italian neorealistic or the cinema of Latin America or Africa, then we started saying, well, where's our cinema? Ozu shoots, and he's sitting on the ground, with his legs crossed in a lotus position with a low angle camera, representing how he remembers his childhood. How do we remember our childhood? We started asking those questions, and that's how all of this came about.
That's it.
Now, for students, if you don't mind, if we take what you just said literally, where is a place you might have been when you had one of these conversations?
You mean at UCLA?
Yeah, but see, there's something that, as no matter how many times as I say it, some people will never hear it as being it could be them, or that they can do this in their way, on their level, right where they're at. And I don't mean level high to low. I mean level like where on Broadway, just like this. Yours is valid, yours is valid. If it's just you. Like, were you in a restaurant? Was it like, late at night? Then we would, like me and Jason have.
It was probably on an airplane. It was probably on an airplane going to France or something. We started traveling the world, going to international film festivals when they were telling us that our films wouldn't sell overseas. So we went to Germany, we went to France, we went to Morocco, we went to Italy. We went to these places and we interacted with the independent filmmakers there. And with
your film in your bag.
Yeah.
You just went to where they say you can't go.
But going through customs with a film in your bag, sometimes they would say, well, we have to confiscate it because we don't know if it's a porno film. And I remember one inspector kind of like guy coming through England, he actually opened up the can. And went 16 millimeter film and went like that. And he said, it's all right. But he wasn't even into the part with the images yet. He was just looking at the film leader like 1, 2, 3. And we just going, we can't laugh at him because he might confiscate it.
Right.
So I think what it was, we gained power from interacting with international filmmakers who, Algerian filmmakers, Tunisian filmmakers, all of these Japanese filmmakers, and everyone was looking for a new way to tell a story, to tell their story, to, you know, tell maybe a contemporary story, but infuse it with their own rhythms, their culture, their tradition, their recipes, their food. And here we were, you know, watching Hollywood movies, and people saying, well, we just want to sell something, so you got to make it sell to Burbank. And it's just like, what? And all those films didn't go very far. But what I'm seeing, unfortunately, is that we're coming around, that cycling back around to people they just want to get paid. They want to be on Netflix now.
Right.
You could do both. You could be on Netflix, you could get paid, and you can make something meaningful. Yeah. You know?
This has whet my appetite for fingers crossed.
Well, what are you gonna make? What are you?
I'm gonna make something, but for a year from now, fingers crossed, for a year from now, for when we pull all these ideas into a room together for a couple of hours.
Okay.
That kind of celebration doesn't happen frequently enough, but I think by virtue of this concert coming back to the South, because this will begin, then I will have to take it to Texas and Louisiana, right? I have to take it out. We have to go out west, California. You know, we have to continue to even for us to even feel what it feels like to be in the different landscapes and the stories from people who have made work around it, right? Who weren't afraid to tackle it and wrestle with it and produce something that hadn't been seen before or sounded a certain way. That's what we're also searching for.
Well, I distinctly remember, Julie, you mentioning the word crab. And so with that in mind, I will see you all next year in Charleston.
Crab and
Thank you.
smoked oysters.
Thank you. Thank you.